our many conversations thus far on Vuillard and painting and art and the art world. And Claudia, I'd love to know what shows I'm doing. So when you figure them out, just let me know. Send me an email, and then I'll know what I'm doing the next couple of years. In any event,
You know it's not exactly like that.
I'm trying to be lighthearted and entertaining and amusing even. So, Lisa, it's great to have you here. And on the screen, you see the comparison that we're going to get to later on of Lisa's work with one of her major sources, Edouard Vuillard. But it was a surprise to me when Claudia came into the office, probably her second week at the museum, saying, so I told Lisa Yuskavage that we're doing a Vuillard show, and Lisa said, well, he's one of the artists that really influenced me a huge amount from my student years. I didn't think about that. Vuillard was always someone that fell between the cracks, and I thought, he's not that kind of canonical master or mistress that you look to, like Picasso, Cézanne, Duchamp, Pollock, or even Warhol. But that was my own myopia, my own short-sightedness. There are a lot of parallels for Lisa's work with Vuillard: realism, naturalism, the use of figures to create psychological tension and drama, formal issues, technical aspects, and creating emotion through the figure composition and light. So my first conversations with Lisa got me to thinking about one of the things that Lisa told me, which was there are a lot of other artists who are channeling Vuillard. And I think of those artists, and this is an old master, Howard Hodgkin is perhaps the most eloquent about where Vuillard sits in the canon. And I'm quoting him in setting the stage for Lisa's discussion of Vuillard and me, I'll call it, Vuillard and Lisa, that no one in the museum knows where to put Vuillard. He's fallen between one index card and another for too long. But Hodgkin says, each picture is a new adventure, a new beginning. There's nothing that will enable you to bypass having a look at the pictures themselves. And I think from my conversations with you, Lisa, that looking at the painting, the way the work is painted, the way Vuillard handles paint, handles composition, is something that you can't look, it's not iconic imagery. Mm-hmm. It's an imagery that seeps out very slowly from the canvas. Do you want to say something about that aspect of Vuillard?
Well, I mean, I think if we go to this particular painting, which being an artist, I of course don't know dates or size. I know, so I can go like this. This painting is at the Met. I don't know the title of the painting. It's obviously his mother, who was a seamstress, and she's this big lump at the bottom.
Wait, are we talking about
the Vuillard, not
okay.
My own painting. My mother's, this apparently is being streamed live, and I told my mother an hour ago that about it, otherwise, she would have killed me, but that is not my mother on the other side. But she does have red hair, so anyway, so Vuillards Mother was obviously a subject for him, and the reason why I was so amazed by this picture, and this reproduction does not in any way do it justice. This is, let's just say, a diagram so that you can go and see it yourself, because it is a thing that hangs on the wall and it's a glowing box of light. The painting, of course, it represents things. You can describe what's in the picture to someone, but it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant that it's his mother. I mean, I don't find, Norman was asking me earlier about subject matter in Vuillard, and one of the things that people find very opaque about me, like I'm pretending, is that I don't really think about subject matter that much. It's even in Vuillard, what amazes me is how the picture is just such a profound visual thing, that the wall, which in reality is lime green, when you go see the painting in person, the painting is lime green, and it glows from within. These window curtains, which you can't really even tell where the light is coming from, other than just the buildup, the profound buildup of greens. He lays green on green on green on green on green and adjusted it. And I remember seeing that painting, and that funny thing in the upper right corner above his mother's head that is some sort of, talk about subject matter. What is it? It looks like an avocado.
I knew that was coming.
I mean, and I thought, I guess he knew what an avocado looked like cut in half, but it's sort of, such a strange thing. I know it's not an avocado, it's some sort of an ornament on the wall, like a picture, but it's just this sort of incredible thing, and the fact that he wedges this lump, his mother, in the corner, heavy, dowdy dress in the corner, and just creates this counterweight to all of this luminosity. Like she's sort of this huge, absorptive thing, and everything else is incredibly giving, and she's sort of very crouched and sort of greedy, and sort of, she's obviously sewing, but when I looked at it, it was just such an interesting visual effect of something, really, there's just so much happening in the picture.
And so much happening with the paint in the picture.
And it's not just the paint, but it's how the paint is put together. It's the relationships piled up. And it's such a modest thing. That's a word that I haven't read all the reviews for the show, but the thing about Vuillard, and the reason why I think Vuillard has fallen through the cracks in some weird ways, because he was not someone with a huge amount of bravado. And I know a little bit about his personality. I'm also not that interested in artist biographies so much. I find them bothersome.
Well,
and, like, what was he like? Was he a bachelor? Oh my God, did he have sex with this person? I mean, it's only marginally interesting,
Right.
But I mean, I think the fact that that was his mother and the fact that he lived at home is sort of, important. But the pictures are what make you care about them. And yet, from a sort of extreme modesty of scale, and I do like the smaller pictures better than the bigger pictures, and I do like the earlier pictures better than the later pictures. And I think, but there is just this incredible, they're so incredibly important as objects made by a human being that are remarkable. They're just remarkable things.
Right. What I actually love, and I thank you for making me look at this painting again and again, is the organization of the planes, and the way the light comes through actually has me thinking ahead to Rothko. Not with this particular color, but with the way he gets light through the color. Vuillard gets light through the colors. Anyway, I just wanted to give you a couple of more fun comparisons. The Hodgkin we went through. David Park, it's a painting of 1950, and I think really fun to see the seamstress and the seamstress mid-century, the seamstress late 19th century. And Park has been compared to Vuillard a great deal, and about 1950 was probably the height of Vuillard's reputation in the United States, too. So it makes great sense that there would be that node of interest from someone like Park, who might be considered at the time West Coast Intimist. People have compared Alex Katz's work with Vuillard an awful lot, especially works like this, the informal crop compositions, the attention to family and friends, the organization of spaces, again, the luminosity. And Lisa was the one who talked a lot about Kai Althoff's early work with relation to Vuillard. And of course, Lisa wasn't the only one who thought this. A number of reviews of this first show of Kai Althoff's at Anton Kern mentioned Vuillard, actually mentioned Kai Althoff as the love child of Egon Schiele and Edouard Vuillard. And I love that, but I also love to look at the Kai Althoff with this remarkable picture, the
Wow.
consultation of Vuillard, and I put them together because in terms of subject, tonality, they're really mind-boggling, and that Vuillard is really a remarkable picture too.
Where is that Vuillard?
Private collection.
I've never seen it.
We can arrange it.
Oh, good.
And even Kai Althoff's large installations with their piled-on interest in the object, in the object almost overwhelming the space, I think makes a great relation to Vuillard. And I think I was at the Independent Art Fair, and there were two works that were channeling Vuillard next to one another. One was by this artist, Marc-Camille Heimowitz, who had a show recently at Andrew Krebs and actually used Vuillard and Bonnard paintings in his installation and on his artist-made wallpapers, which are made inspired by the Intimist or the Nobbies. And here is a Heimowitz installation of a Vuillard that he moved, and Heimowitz is, like Lisa's favorite painter, is Vuillard, even though the practice is totally different. And he moved the painting from the Museum of Modern Art in Edinburgh to the Inverness House in Edinburgh, and again staged it on these Intimist wallpapers that the artist designs. There we go. Peter Doig has been called Vuillard on acid. And Mama Anderson's work has been considered a Vuillard for the post-Hitchcock age. Now, Tina Barney has talked a great deal, who's a photographer, has talked a great deal about the influence of Vuillard on her fascination with family, intensity, psychology, pattern, and decoration. And I'll quote Tina because the things that entice me are light and then textures and the colors, and precisely the things Vuillard was interested in, and the patterns. I think the idea of making a picture big had to do with Barney's love of detail and the feeling that every single object counts and is important. So and I love this more recent Tina Barney with the collectors who might even be family, with the fabric-covered walls, the intensity of pattern on pattern, painting on painting, when we look at the portrait of David Wey that's downstairs in the galleries. I consider personally Kerry James Marshall as a Vuillard working with African-American memory, and then there's a host of Lucy Scares, the sculptor Lucy Scares' work, who holds her own very humble, textured sculptures up to Vuillard's album, which is in the Met, and she does a whole series of photographs of these. Isar Patkin creates these entire room environments that almost wrap you inside a painting instead of looking at a painting. You become wrapped in a painting. This was Holly Solomon's dining room, which he did in painted shirred rubber, and you would feel wrapped inside a suite of paintings, the way Vuillard did in the Bernstein house installation right here in New York in 1940. And those two paintings from the Guggenheim are in our show. And finally, Jonas Wood, and I think by this time you get the idea. People sort of looking past one another in interiors that are intensely laden with pictures, details, books, patterns, colors, textures. And here is Lisa's work, which will...
Something of mine finally looks good in PowerPoint. I'm like, yay.
Yay, thank Rachel for narrating.
Thank you.
So I think the comparison, one of the blogs this week talking about this conversation had the portrait of Lucy Hessel's cousin Marcel Aron on a sofa, on a divan, next to this picture. And so I think that's as good as lead-in
That was
as
Robin
possible.
Sembalist over there. She said, "So far, so good," which, is that what you're
So,
talking about? That was
yes,
fun.
yes,
That was
that-
funny. And it's, you know,
She does have a sense of humor.
well, what Robin wrote it was late when I finally read the email that was sent to me about everything that came up about this. And I have to say, the interest in this has come as kind of a surprise to me. I mean, when I was asked to do this, I was like, oh, yeah, whatever, I didn't even tell any of my friends. I was like, like, whatever, it's like, we'll do it, I don't think like Vuillard needs me, but if Claudia asked me to do something, okay. And, I enjoyed meeting Norman. He's a very lovely guy. We had a good talk about Vuillard. But then suddenly it just seemed like, like, wow, you and Vuillard? That's so weird. And I was like, for who? For Vuillard or for me? And the thing is that aside from my husband and a few other people, I'm sort of the only person who's been doing me and like been following how I have been reacted to, or my work has been reacted to over the years. So when I say that a lot of people I thought that a lot of the reaction was, and you have to sort of trust me on this because this is something that I experienced for so long, and I think that it's sort of shifted, and it certainly shifted, I think, in what Robin was saying in her thing. She was kind of like curious, like what I took was a little bit like, what's this hip chick gonna do with this, dead artist kind of, like that was more like you were saying, like, how are you gonna, it was surprising on that level, and I, trust me, I'm not that hip, and I'm sure that Vuillard was a lot hipper when he was alive and lived a great, a great life amongst really cool people. But I
Maybe
was
more risque in his
probably
personal life than you.
Yes, I have not had sex with the wife of my art dealer. I was really kind of like, wow, not oh, I can't believe
But I
I
guess
just
this
said that. Well, I said I did not, and or have never done.
But that could be held against you.
That I didn't? Well, that's why we're not that interesting anymore in these guys. Anyway, but the point is that in my own experience of the way I've been sort of looked at in relationship to maybe saying that I would be interested in something like this, is sort of like, he's this tender genius and you're this sort of,
I call, he's known as the Intimist, and so I've dubbed you the irreverent Intimist.
well, and that would be the kind way of saying it. Just say like,
Well, I'm kind.
Well, no, I think that would be kind. It's like I've heard worse things or whatever, and so it's just the kind of thing like Vuillard's up here and you're kind of down here, and it's like it's not really you're not even really, you're an illustrator, you're not really even a painter, blah blah blah, whatever. And I only bring that up to say that in a sense, like I that's not really, I was surprised that, I guess in some ways, because I do think that some of the surprise is like, why would anybody allow me to talk on Vuillard? Because I'm not an expert, and I thought, oh my God, like I'm not, I hope you guys realize I am not a Vuillard expert. I only have looked at Vuillard for hundreds and hundreds of hours and
that's precisely the reason.
And drawn my own goofy conclusions, which was funny because when Norman was in my studio one time, we were talking, and I said something that was wild about a painting, and he corrected me, and I said, Norman, he asked for proof or something. And I said, Norman, I'm a painter. I don't need to footnote anything. I just make these leaps and I make these assumptions. And that is really what I think makes paintings happen, is that I can look at a Vuillard painting and I can make some assumptions that I don't have to prove, but the proof is by playing something out in a painting. This painting I made around the year 2000. It is a period of my work where I worked from actual models. This was a woman's house. The actual house was so magnificently female. It was a house I visited in Westchester, and it was like, I was always working for a long time with a female figure, and I always imagined that the female figure in my paintings was like a stand-in for the personification of painting itself. And then that they were not real women, that these were painted things, and that was always something that always played out in my mind, is that no matter what anyone said about what I was doing, I had to remember that this is not about something out there. That the only way that you can approach my paintings or try to understand my paintings is by leaving any of those questions that might be about, like, who are these women and why are they in this place? Just look at it as a painting, and all of the assumptions that I make and the reasons why I do things are always sort of, if I'm succeeding, because it may be that I might not succeed at it, I'm putting things together in a way to pile up more and more and more paintedness. And in this environment, I was making, for the first time, I was literally becoming a little bit weary of the fact that I was making paintings where it was a figure on a monochrome, and I wanted to work where a picture had, where the edge of the figure actually had to confront a thing, like that there were things next to, it was not just a body against a field. And I thought, but what thing? What would the thing be? So when I, as I often do, I just left the question open. And one day I walked in this house, and I said, this place, every fiber in this place is female. And it was tufted and, fluffed and done. And it is a house that only a woman was living in, and, all the men had been banished. And a divorcee house, and a very strong woman, and she had done every detail. And she also, I just realized that she had some Vuillards in the house.
Okay.
And
and Westchester, Neuilly, outside of Paris.
She was kind enough to let me come back with all these people, and I had to take pictures very quickly, and brought in people who really didn't belong in that environment. These were people from my past, and they, I was worried they were going to steal something. It was like a very funny day. I was like, don't anybody take anything. But it was like I was sort of very interested in sort of merging these kind of very sort of sticking this sort of synthetically kind of merging these actors that have been in my imagination, finding characters to represent these figures that I had only invented. The blonde was an invented figure. I had to find somebody. Well, who would it be? If I'm going to put it in front of something, who is it? And I went back to my archetype. I found somebody from my past that I called her, and she said, "I've been following your work. Thank God for the internet." So it's like, I've been following your work. Sure, I'll pose for you, and just brought people together to do this. Anyway, this house really was, it only occurred to me now that maybe the woman was thinking about Vuillard when she decorated. I don't know, but everything was so, what I loved about it is that paint, color, light, the representation, the walls, the frame, everything could be a painted thing that was oozing with a feminine spirit. I like the idea that there is a spirit life in everything. That it's not, that it separates from reality. And I feel like trying to look at pictures, not just my own, but try to understand them from the point of view of anything but as pure pictures.
How do you see the feminine? This is something I just started thinking about today in Vuillard, the representation of women in Vuillard, or the kind of environment that you were just describing. Do you find?
This goes back only to the biography automatically jumps in because he lived with people making corsets, and so it was like all around him, and he obviously felt very comfortable being a Vuillard, the voyeur, and there's so much voyeurism in his work. I always saw his work as a little bit verging on being a peeping Tom.
Because you saw
He wanted,
everything.
well, in a weird way, it's sort of, it's a foolish thought, but, what would Vuillard do if times, he had he could have made them, if it had been more appropriate to make them kind of, a little more risque, would he have?
Well, Renoir was certainly making some.
But I don't really, I feel like that these are more so because they actually I think repression is so much more, there was a darkness in Vuillard that just wants to get out, that I almost feel like it would lead to something not joyous.
I guess one of the characterizations of your work that I read that sort of stopped me in my tracks, but made me realize, well, this is also the way I had looked at your work, and that the representation, the subject matter, the naturalism or unnaturalism in your work, I guess, is that your work is also color-field. And I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I think you start to get this sense of the chromatic nature of your work and these vast expanses.
Go back to the last one. This painting, I don't think as much about color field as I actually created this painting. Like, it was a really weird thought, which was, what would happen if I laid the color wheel instead of parallel to your face, which is the way you always look at it, a color wheel, and laid it in space, as if a landscape, and painted chromatically, moving through the color wheel back in space. It was a completely, I had the thought and I just went with it, and sort of decided to sort of, obviously there's things that I had to adjust here and there, but it just moving from, through color, moving not across a plane, but around, almost kind of around the wheel. So it was actually kind of exciting, because when things work for me, they tend to work in ways like that, where I have a very specific, weird leap about color that is I sort of putting things together in a weird way, like the idea of something flat-footed and flat like a color wheel is it's a diagram, and think of it as in landscape space, because it's another way of talking about atmospheric perspective, to foreground, middle ground, background. It's simply that something, forget about going around this way, just going foreground, middle ground, background. the way to represent that, in some ways when I was teaching, I would say it has to change. The way something is made in the front should change the back if you are interested in representing it not as a flat thing. Going to Vuillard, one of the things that's very interesting about Vuillard for me is how much those paintings upstairs, so many of them look like walls, and that they don't give you the illusion of space. As much stuff that he's doing to try to move your eye through, that he obviously, I was so taken with Vuillard as a student. Your next image is one of my student paintings from...
I think it's your next image.
My next image, well, it's your museum, so it's your property. So I don't know how to use that.
Okay.
So,
I can.
but when I was a student, actually, what's so funny to me is like I'm still doing the same thing as I did in 1983, maybe worse. I don't know. It's like this was a painting I made when I was a student, and sort of thinking about Vuillard and sort of organizing the space in terms of warm and cool, and being very systematic about the space. I, did have a job. This is like, biography, like not that interesting, but I did have a job at a weird, creepy swimming pool called Body Beautiful after being an art student during the day, and I would see like certain things, and I developed my visual memory. Nothing was painted from life. I just thought about certain pictorial ideas and would sort of pretty much run home and paint aspects of things that I had seen. I was very interested in, Degas as well, and it wasn't just Vuillard, but the thing
As
about...
was, I might add, Vuillard.
Yeah. But the thing about Vuillard is that I was so taken with it that I followed it back. When I would look at a book on Vuillard, I would follow it back, and I found that he was very interested in, so speaking of influence, you've been talking about the influence forward of
And
Vuillard.
backwards.
But Vuillard was so interested in this person named Puvis de Chavannes that I've never heard anybody, rarely ever talk about. The Met has some paintings hanging, and there's something sort of, uninteresting to people about Puvis, but was so interesting as a place to go back to. When I looked at Puvis, it didn't really give Puvis. I could not get anything from myself, except for the use of the realization of how many people came out of it, and like what the relationships between artists were to Vuillard that I didn't even know about, like Seurat.
And those surfaces. And
the sense of the painting as a wall, and wanting to make something decorative as opposed to moving through space, as I was describing before. And there are times when you ask me about the color field thing always sort of makes me think about moving across the surface in a more decorative sense. And there's a painting that I made, I must say making or made, because I'm not sure if it's done, just about to finish, a painting that is extremely much a buildup of color, and it feels very flat with the certain exceptions. And so I move back and forth between being interested in making something that feels like a kind of a confrontational wall versus kind of playing with allowing the eye to move back into a sort of sense of atmosphere.
But you have been doing that in your last show.
Yeah.
A lot of the works were very large scale and had that kind of, the glowing color of the green, the big green picture.
It also might help to say that when I was a student, I was at Tyler School of Art, and these are paintings that I got into graduate school with at Yale, and these were all invented pictures, and really strongly I fell madly in love with Vuillard as a way of learning about how to put a picture together. I mean, I remember when I made that bowl up, the glowy orange bowl, I was just like so excited. I was like, pure orange as a shadow, and with like this kind of really crappy, I was using very bad paint, I was a student, this very crappy white paint to represent light, and I thought, wow, white is like blue here. And, it's just so exciting, but I was really like, it was like dancing with a master. It's like you should, when you're young, sort of try to imitate, I think.
Right, and then break away.
Hopefully,
in
but you
some
never
moment.
completely break away because they're really, there's only like messing it up later.
Right.
It's like there really isn't. It's like I still probably try and just sort of it's much more convoluted now, and I think that the thinking about these pictures, I just realized the thing that when I was looking at Vuillard, and I still see in Vuillard, was this incredible sense of the intensity of how light enlivens walls, and I mean that's obviously something that anybody with an eye can see about him, and how the figure disappears. I loved the way he played hide and seek with the figures. That was an exciting thing for a person. I was 18, 19 years old, and I knew I wanted to be a figurative painter, which was a very weird thing to want to be where I was. Everybody else was painting abstract paintings. I just decided it was okay to be a loser. That was really like a choice. I was like, check that box, fine, I'm out. And because everybody was like, why would you want to do that?
What were you thinking?
I just said, I don't really understand what you're doing. I only want to do something I can understand. And so when I was following Vuillard, I was kind of off on my own, and slowly but surely, people started to come to me, just like you're doing with the show. I love Vuillard. The teachers like Stephen Green, abstract painters would say, I just love Vuillard, and then they would look through the book with me, and this is what I love about him, and what I love about him is that it's such pure picture making, and then everyone wanted to talk about it who was actually a painter. So it was so unpopular, and for the kids, and it still is. It's like, those areas of the museum are, when you think of a Bonnard show, it's like not exactly where, I mean, it's so interesting because people these days, like their interest when they think, like, I don't really understand when people talk about old masters necessarily with me, because actually for me, my masters are more like the turn of the century guys, and the sort of they're not so old really, and I mean, I like Italian painting, but where I really live is, and it comes this expression of a painted thing, as opposed to a hand or a bowl. What I really ask myself is it a painted thing? When you see something in a picture, it's the difference between a representation and an illustration and a painted, whatever, hand or nose, is that it has to have it's transformed on some level,
well,
and
I even a bit magic.
And I'm not saying that I always
transformation.
succeed at it. It's something that is, it's worth going back and being kind of riveted to try again and again to do.
Well, remember, Vuillard himself was always looking at the masters, and there's one Vuillard in a private collection in New York. It's quite a large painting of him painting the Grand Gallery at the Louvre. And he was in the Louvre all the time. And he was looking at Titian, and, he was looking at the masters, and he was probably looking at Chardin and Fragonard too. And I sometimes look at some of your works and I think of the 18th century painters like Boucher and Fragonard for the kind of that feminine, subject matter and actually feel of your paintings.
Well, I'm not as interested in them, and I get that sometimes, but it's like, that's I'm misfiring in a direction, and that this
art historical overreaching.
It's okay. I mean, maybe it's my overreaching, but anyway, we don't have to look at these student paintings very much. These are little tiny paintings. They're like all from the 80s, but I thought that they would be interesting for the audience to see that the people don't often see student work or the beginnings of someone's work. I find it amazing. I was mumbling a little more, but I was doing what I'm still interested in the sort of They were always paintings of females. They were in interiors. Light was a strong carrier. The sense of psychology, what I do find very fascinating about Vuillard is, and Norman said this earlier, keep going, that
Okay.
the sense of...
Well, this was at Yale.
Yes, this is still
painting,
Yale School, yeah, is the sense of,
Stop here.
yeah, the feeling of that every piece of it has, you said, sort of a psychological, but I almost feel like it's even more than psychological. It's psychic. It has like an intense, like it's
Just intense.
like really good paintings feels like a seance. Like this person. Like if you really, really look at it and you really listen, like they're still talking. But they're talking through the sort of the sort of actualization of like that piece of light moving. It's just so. The strength of his personality comes so, like, he, on some levels, I mean, I guess people thought of him as sort of like a timid guy because of the way he represents himself or the way he was represented. But there's this incredible sense of his inner intensity that I feel in every square inch of it. And luminosity is unlike anything I have ever seen. It's not the luminosity of any other picture.
I as a student, undergraduate student, I always associated Vuillard with Rothko in a very super simplistic way, but it was the characterization, the way light, the way the paintings carried a kind of light.
I mean, I'm not sure, this is painting in the show?
No.
I mean, if I can take it as...
But you selected it.
Yeah, I just didn't remember it was in the show. I mean, I would like to talk about pictures that are in the show, because then we know that people, like this one.
Is in the show.
This painting I'd never seen before I looked at the show, and the thing that just really struck me was the figure that is apparently reaching, I was like, the title was The Drawer, and I was like, what drawer? I was just like looking at this thing. I was, it's like not only does he obfuscate in some ways the figure, but the other thing, and then the title sort of comes in handy there. And I was like, what are we looking at? And it really doesn't matter to me because like the first thing is that I really want to look. I want to take the time to figure it out. And it's not what's going on in the picture. It only helped to organize some aspect of it. But what's so amazing about what he did as a painter here is that dress, the girl with that's kicking back, and whatever is in that drawer that she's kicking up to get to, that dress, the brown, is so clearly just a wash, and it's put on the canvas super thinly. It looks, unless the painting's been varnished, it just looks like a turpentine wash, and it looks almost like a watercolor. When you look at it, it's almost unpainted. The thing that the whole painting is about is one of the least painted things in the painting. And that just was like, okay, I can go home now.
Right.
Stop looking, hold, let's cut, just stop, because that's a big thing.
Right. Well, even with Vuillard's portraits, Vuillard always said that he paints people in their interiors. And I think that in terms of subject matter, or the way he handles the organization of his vision, is that the people in his images, in his paintings, are no more important than the drawer or the wallpaper or the door that's open.
And that's true, but I think that in some of those portraits, some of those portraits fall flat for me as a painter, because there's something that is identically articulated over the entire thing. And I think with this kind of picture of Vuillard's, people talk about it as like abstract. I don't, it's like I don't like that word in relation to this, but it's like in terms of its painted thingness.
Right.
Like, okay, so we got a pointer, right? There's like, she said top thing.
Here, you just push the red.
Well, I could also get up. Like this shape, when you look at this problem with that is then you couldn't really hear me.
Right.
Anyway, that shape of under the foot is the thing that's painted in this sort of positive negative. It's a very drawing 101 idea, but the best things in art like it's sort of like that everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten. I kind of think like everything you need to know in some ways in painting, you could learn in drawing 101 and painting 101 if you're really, if you can be that clear and find a way to do something amazing with it. That painting, and then that weird wall of wallpaper, I suppose, but the way that it's just like it doesn't belong there. It's a crazy painting.
And I find the other door or the other wall, which is sort of the gray wash,
yeah,
as almost weirder than the wallpaper.
Yeah, it is. It's
because it dematerializes totally.
What's great about this painting is it's a mystery, and it's so obvious in some ways and so completely mysterious in other ways. It's absolutely magical, and that's the thing about Vuillard is that when he's really good, there is nothing more magical, and it's like there's a lot of paintings I love. But there's always something that always brought me back to it, and perhaps it is because it's closer to our time. I mean, if you think about, I know one of the masters that Vuillard looked at was Vermeer, because there's a painting when I was a student at Yale. There's a painting, I think, at the Yale Art Gallery, because I think I tried to copy it, which is a weird thing to do, to copy a Vuillard, because it's not like, it's not like, it's like,
what
I don't know,
learning?
it seemed like a weird thing to do when I started doing it, because it in a weird way, it just, I don't know, it was a better thing to sort of think about than to try to sort of make a replica of, and that's an interesting thing too, because it's not fancy in the way it's made. It's pretty straightforward. So it wasn't like there was like a skill level to try to kind of get there. It was more like thinking about it. But there's a painting by Vuillard, as I was saying, that is a woman looking out a window, and it's pretty much he was absolutely looking at a Vermeer painting, and it's almost like we don't have a comparison of it, but this kind of I prefer the Vermeer painting that he was looking at. I'm not that much of a fan that I'm going to not say I don't like certain paintings of his, which is fine. It's like anyway, this painting in the show, also, the painting, the weird relationship of red, yellow, blue in this painting is striking to me. It's just like what counts as the amounts of what is yellow, where the red is, how it is. It's sort of, if you look at the palette, it's a very strange palette and kind of wonderful, because I almost feel like that blue that he threw on to represent the girl's back. But I think about the painting without that, and what would happen. I'm looking at the screen here, that's why I'm not looking here. I don't know, it's just in the gray as blue. He's a very smart colorist. People always talk about paintings, or Vermeer from here, like he's yummy, he's got a big heart. It's really, he's very smart. When you look at the good paintings, they're very smart pictures. And he's very thoughtful.
They're economical
and
in all their lushness.
But it's like, maybe this was a found picture. He knocked it off, but his brain was quite startling when it comes to color. That's something that I've looked at him a lot in terms of color, and it takes me by surprise, and it's so unusual, and he made so many leaps with it. But
I don't think he knocked this off, by the way.
Yeah, this is a crazy picture. This is a fantastic picture. One of the things I love about this picture is the foreground figures, the pattern on that dress. It's white, but the actual color of paint that he used for that, next to the brown in the pattern, is just, it's totally fascinating. It's like those kind of little decisions, this weird color that he used to kind of represent white in how something is in shadow. He rarely represents light as a, like the way we're lit, breaking light. He you know, it's like they're zones, that he paints zones a lot. And there's people in these zones are like dropped into a shadow zone, a pocket.
I guess I always look at these pictures, at Vuillard's pictures, in terms of electric light was very new at the time. And I think he gives you the sense of the artificiality of that kind of glow of the magical lantern, which had to seem weird.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden there were lamps in the house instead of candles.
I mean, I don't know, did anybody before him shove people like the way these people are shoved to the edges? Did anybody ever do that before?
Gauguin, maybe? Because he looked at Gauguin a lot.
But that, I know that they were all looking at Puvis. I don't know, I mean, so I assume they were all around the same.
But Gauguin sort of was the
But
forerunner.
But was Gauguin as vicious to his
No.
subjects? Because that's like kind of mean to do. You know, just, you know, cramming people in.
Well, and even the way the heads are, you know, foreshortened or unforeshortened, they become patterns.
I mean, I think the other thing that's interesting is just like how not much is really ever going. It's not that interesting whatever's going on. It's never, like, this is one of the great ones in my humble opinion, that the Phillips Collection, you know, it's
Such a Phillips taste, too.
What do you mean by that?
This kind of, you know, very formal arrangement, very luscious paint, where the objects depicted, I love the newspaper and the wallpaper. Like, what creates that difference is almost the big question to me in his notion of paint. The newspaper, the wallpaper, and the outdoor scene. You know, it's almost like the same palette, just slightly differentiated. And that's where I see some connection between the way you get these vast expanses of glowing color in your work and outside and outdoors or indoors.
Yeah, I mean, in this painting, there's something called contrast of extension, which is, you know, you always think about color contrast, but it's like in this painting, it's like, you know, you have all of this, what's called broken color, grays, just like vast amounts of grays, and, you know, just color that was beaten into a pulp but still glows. And then obviously that little tiny triangle of perfect orange, red, and how then you, after you see that, you start realizing that everything else has been turned green.
Well, we're
It's a
gonna
pretty-
pass that. And here's another phenomenal.
I mean, the funny thing about this, I don't feel like, you know, it's like, I feel like we're sitting here talking about Vuillard, but it's like, I have this, as a painter, I feel like he doesn't need us. We should just shut up and everybody should go look at the show.
Go look at the show.
Like, we're kind of we're not helping. We're just getting in the way here.
Right.
You know, so at any rate, the perfect wallflower. It's like, you know, it's so mean to do that to your sister,
Right.
but he couldn't help himself. And this is a painting
Talk about yours.
a painting of mine called Wilderness that was from 2009. And in this picture, I actually did the picture on the left first. It's a real no-no, but I like a no-no. I did the picture on the left first, and the picture, the bowl, the figure holding the bowl, actually, I had made a little study for it. The bowl was empty. And I took a snapshot and I sent it to a friend who's not an artist at all, but is very smart, and he like doesn't filter too much. It's just sort of like you know. He said, "Hey, dude, I love the bowl and I love that it's empty." And I was like, well, and he says, "It's cool that it's empty, you know." He says, "It'd be really dumb if there were like apples in it or something." and
Just tell you not to do it.
And I
right?
thought about it, and I said, you know, dude, obviously a young person, I said, well, you know that an empty bowl would have a way more heaviness, that, you know, it's like, you know, than a lot more meaning than if I put some apples in it. And he said, wow, I hadn't thought about that. And I said, well, you know, this is why it's my area, you know. So we sort of like, I thought it was kind of an interesting conversation, and I thought, it was interesting that the bowl was empty for so long, and it actually brought me to a question that I said is like, wow, like, okay, this is really begging, like the figure sitting here, it's like, what would you want to present? And I thought the obvious thing is because you made that joke about apples. I said, but it's not just apples. Saison's apples are what I want to put in the bowl. They're not just apples. And because what I wanted to mark, like lift my leg and mark my spot. We say this painting is like, like the rudeness of that, was already going, in the direction there was. So I thought, this is a terrible idea to take, a Saison's apples. Okay, but I live by terrible ideas, so I'll take this. So I decided to represent exactly some apples that were painted, like from a reproduction of a Saison, just to see what would happen. And what it did was it actually just told me, like, that what I was saying as I'm presenting, which kind of is, that moment in art history, which I think is part of the Vuillard conversation, where a person didn't have to say, this ridiculous conversation I have to have 100 times a day besides spelling my last name and pronouncing it for people, is, are you a figurative painter or an abstract painter? And it's such a, like, obvious, like this conversation. Like, I fantasize about the moment when that wasn't a conversation, but yet people were not doing, they weren't interested in tricking the viewer. In that moment in art history where an apple was not meant to make you hungry and make you want to feed yourself, but make you have, an appetite for painting. And I thought, the painting kind of like grew out of that kind of like staking that sort of idea and the dress. So the whole painting became made of
But you
of
made
marks.
the left side of the painting
Well,
first.
yes, and then I put the right side, I continued it, and then later I did the triptych the same way. But these sort of like a little bit unorthodox ideas about sort of like keeping something empty and then sort of working and trusting and kind of an intuitive aspect. But the point is that the picture, the mark making of the apple and that sort of thing, as opposed to mimetic, I realized like what I was saying to myself more than anyone, I suppose to a viewer, if anyone, is like to look at the picture, but I was saying to myself, I'm not interested at all in mimetic art. This is my picture where I say, I'm presenting with these figures that I'm interested
And with the fruit.
Paint.
Right.
I'm interested in paint primarily, and then the fruit. If we had a detail shot, her dress is just, the fruit marks just jump out, and her dress is my homage to play with Vuillards. Like if I could, it's like every painter wants to be able to paint that wall where the sister, that painting, right. The one behind, where the sisters, everybody wants to do that, is like had an interest in Vuillard. Everybody's like, I could just figure out how to do that. If I had a way, so, it's hard to do that because he did it perfectly. So this dress was made up of, just complete attack of, it's not a rendered dress except for the lines. And the whole painting was made out of relative dots and dashes of sorts. And it really was an important clarifying painting for me. Anyway. And that's the last.
This is the last painting. The last painting Vuillard painted, in fact. And
how old was he when he made it?
70. Mm-hmm. And really, again, what you said before, we shouldn't be looking at this in reproduction, because I remember when Stephen Brown, who was the curator of the exhibition, came back from France, he brought me a photograph of this, and I said, what are you interested in this for? He said, it's just the most phenomenal picture, and I went to Amiens to see it, and the Musée d'Orsay sent it to Amiens to get it off the premises. And I said, so what did it look like in Amiens? And she said, well, it was in the basement. And so I said, oh, you're really picking a loser. And when the curator from the Musée d'Orsay came, he said, we found a new
Wow.
masterpiece. And
The thing that's so amazing about this picture, and it brings up a topic that for those people, are people going to be able to go look at the show after this? I hope. I mean,
Jennifer,
I don't want to get people in trouble.
you have to come back.
Oh, okay, well, the actual use of material in Vuillard, when I was looking at Vuillard as a young person, I kept seeing the word distemper. And I was like, you know, obviously, I don't know if anybody is familiar with it, but distemper I had to look up and then tried out myself. It's very interesting. It is rabbit skin glue mixed with pigment. And rabbit skin glue is what typically, when you stretch a canvas, after you stretch it across the bars, the frame, you put rabbit skin glue on it to separate, because it's a water, you buy the crystals, and it turns into a very thin liquid, and it absorbs into the cotton duck and gives a layer of protection, because oil will rot the linen or the canvas. So then on top of that, you can put a ground of very lean white lead traditionally. Now what's so interesting is that I'm sure Vuillard was not the first person to work in distemper, but he was the great painter in distemper. And
it creates a lot of problems for the pictures, too.
I'm sure that it's a very brittle material, and because oil paint is nice because it's, it's flexible, but so one thing that was sort of interesting to me about Vuillard was that he made so many pictures with that and went very wild with it, and that's part of the reason why the pictures get so pebbly looking on the surface. But this picture, and a lot of his pictures,
but they can't be varnished, so they have a different kind of surface.
They're very dry. They're very dry looking. I think he
purposely wanted.
They look a little like liquid pastels at their best in some ways. And that's what's sort of fascinating to me, because I've been working in pastels, this idea of pure pigment liquefied. And the thing I was going to say is that because he's not working in oil paint on this, and in many of these distempers, he did work on cardboard. And the color of this orangey color that comes through many of his paintings, this one is not on cardboard, but I think that he was smart enough to try to imitate it. He noticed it. To be a painter, you have to notice things and then seize on it, not take the opportunity to go forward with it. But in many of his distempers, and even oil paintings, he worked on cardboard. And cardboard has a very particular color, and it is this wonderful color. It also changes over time, but it's this wonderful yellowy orange beige color, and he often let that color come through a lot. And when you look at a painting, I used to tell my students, if you don't get yelled at by a guard, you didn't look at the painting properly. I am always being yelled at by guards, and I always put my hands behind my back, and sort of make sure that everybody sees where my hands are.
But your nose is on the
But
canvas.
you have to look at these things very closely and with your glasses on, because see where it's important with Vuillard. It's fun with Vuillard. It's a great ride with Vuillard to see what color the grounds are. The ground is the unpainted part, what comes through, what's sparkling. In this painting, what I liked about this painting, Norman wanted me to talk about it, I was like, okay. And then I went and looked at it, and I loved it because, it's an amazing painting, so simple. It's sort of, it almost feels like a Van Gogh drawing or something. But the undercolor, the underpainting, I think what he did is a very large painting for him in distemper on canvas. And I think that he very cleverly mixed a color to imitate his cardboard, because he understood how successful that was, toned the canvas, let it dry, and then painted with these variations of grays. There's like it's warm and cool grays, I think, that are made out of umbers. And
tiny bit of blue in it.
And just was kind of like broken color again, and just drew with the distemper. It's a medium almost like tempera or gouache, like you draw with it, it dries as you're putting it down. So you can't, it has to be done in broken marks. And at any rate, I think that the physicality of Vuillard is really, very fascinating thing. So when you do look at the exhibition or whenever you see a Vuillard painting, make sure you see, and that I always get a thrill from seeing what's going on in the terms of how it was made, the physical quality of it.
I think we have to wrap it up. We're talking about the last painting. Lisa, thank you a million for coming. Thank you for sharing your ideas with us. And I do hope everyone will be back to look at the Vuillard show time and again. And do we have time for questions? So there, Jennifer, I'll let you call.
There doesn't have to be a question.
And it doesn't have to be, but there's a question.
I'm curious about the painting that was hanging in the beginning on
Pardon?
the right. You didn't speak about it. The little girl.
The painting
Yes.
of mine?
No, yes. No, it's your painting.
This one?
Yes.
I didn't speak about my painting. Well, that painting I just put, well, it was sort of like when Claudia told me they're doing a Vuillard show, and I said, she said something about like, in Vuillard and, contemporary art, and I said, I always think about Vuillard, and Claudia and I worked together for a long time, and I don't think it ever came up. There's a lot that doesn't come up, even if you're working with somebody pretty close. And I said, she said, really? And I said, so I quickly sent her, since I already had scanned, because I love this green interior, and then I had an image in mind. I said, I literally worked, my inspiration for the painting Smoker was to try to challenge myself to make a painting and that was almost entirely made out of green with a few tiny exceptions. The skin in this painting is actually a green. It comes straight out of the tube. It's called cobalt green pale. When you put that cobalt green pale down on the palette, it actually looks dark. But the thrill ride for me here was it looks white in this painting, and because color is always relative. I used to teach. I used to play a trick with people. I'd teach them about color, then I'd say, is yellow warm or cool? And they'd say, warm, and I'd say, wrong. It depends. Like the answer to most color questions should be, if you ask a question, is it dark or light, or is it warm or cool, is it bright or dull? The answer should always be, it depends. What are we comparing it to? So that is one of the things that I was playing with here. And then obviously her little,
Shrug.
It's not a shrug, because a shrug would not cover here, but it's the thingy was the painted thingy that's keeping her arms up. It, was one of the few places, aside from the blush on the cheeks, where I let an actual other color in. But everything else was on the tube, whether it looked like it on the palette or in the painting or not, it actually was named green. And that's a fun thing about green. Actually, any color.
One more question? Anyone?
There was a woman here, yeah. She gave up. She was like, ugh.
I think I know that woman.
You know her? You got to make it good now.
You said something earlier about how you thought that a lot of Vuillard's paintings were kind of closed, I think was the word that you used, when you said that, it reminded me that that's something that I've always thought about his paintings too, and so I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about that.
I don't remember the word closed. I'm not sure.
Intense, emotional.
Can you say more what you think, and then maybe it'll trigger?
Yeah, that he was kind of closed maybe, and that he wasn't revealing a lot about himself in those pictures. Damn, I can't remember now exactly what you said.
The thing is that I'm sure whatever you think is at least as interesting or more interesting than what I would think about it. It's just, Vuillard, I don't know what kind of like I said, it's like the kind of person he was or whatever. It's like he definitely presented these incredibly intense hermetic situations. But apparently, he was having sex with his art dealer's wife. That's not that, that's pretty, many of, he was out there, he was, you gotta watch out for the shy ones, right? So that's, anyway, I don't know, I'm sure we could talk another time, but
Anyway, thank you all again.